So thanks very much. We're looking forward to this panel. My name is Liz McCarthy. I'm Head of Marketing at Voxxify. I have experience in diversity and inclusion work in the tech sector in Dogpatch Labs in Dublin. I'd like to introduce our panel who'll be talking today. So on my left is William Organ. He's Senior Analyst at PepsiCo. And William was one of the co-founders of the Equal Employee Resource Group back in 2018, and that's grown over the last 3 or 4 years into one of the biggest ERGs in PepsiCo. Caroline Spillane is HR Operations Manager at TELUS International, and Caroline has done tons of D&I work at TELUS. Some of the things that we might talk about later is the development of Connections, the Women's Network, Professional Parents Network, and more recently, the development of the company's transgender support process. And then finally, we've got Shane McCarthy, who's the Senior Director of Global Strategic Operations at VMware. And Shane is the co-lead of VMware's Ireland's Pride Pillar, and he's a proud ally of the LGBTQ+ community. So over the next 20 minutes, what we're hoping to do is talk about both the personal side of their journey, but also talk about company norms and practices. And we're hoping you'll get some specific kind of practical tips to take away. So before we get going, I'd like to talk about allyship specifically. So Shane, I'd like to get you to explain what allyship means to you and what it means in practice for organizations.
Yeah, so to think that I would be talking about allyship if I brought myself back 5 years ago is amazing to me. But yeah, happy to talk about it, Liz, and a pleasure to be here. And I think David Goff got me like many other people, so that was absolutely incredible. For me, from an allyship perspective, I put it into two. For me, I'm not training anyone or telling anyone how to do it. I'm just telling how I approach it now, right? So I put it into two buckets. There's proactive allyship and there's reactive, right? And proactive for me is doing intentional things to support, the Pride community, right? And it varies from simple things like putting your pronouns after your name on your LinkedIn profile, on your email signature. When you talk about your job and what you do, you include, the Pride pod is, Power of Difference. That's what we have at VMware. That's just the name of the groups we have. You talk about that as an important part of your job when you're talking to people. You get involved in pods again, sorry to use that term, but get involved in the pods, show up, right? 90% of parenting is showing up. I think 90% of allyship is showing up, being there, showing your support, okay? But I think that's kind of useless unless you bring it home, in my opinion. You can't be this person at work who's all great, and someone talked about waving a flag earlier on. If you don't truly live it and you don't truly bring it home, right, to your family, your friends, whoever it is, So for me, allyship, I'm just using simple examples. There's the parade is on Sunday, right? I'm bringing my family. My sister-in-law is coming down from Dublin for the weekend. She's invited to come, right? My son, he's 13, he's here today, right? So again, for him, coming here, being exposed to all this information is great for him so that he can be the ally that I wasn't when I was in secondary school, So it's just many things like that where you can be proactive. And then on the other side of it is the reactive, okay? You're in that situation where you need to simply stick up for somebody, right? You need to call out language, whatever it is, and you stick up for, you stand in front of somebody and you make their case for them. They're tired of doing it. You need to be that person that sticks up for somebody. And equally, when they're not there, there's a common past, there's something said, you need to, that's the easiest time in the world for me, not to be an ally, right? Or for anyone, just, okay, no one knows any different, let's get on. And you obviously need to step up. And Liz, 4 years ago, I didn't know any of this, okay? So I can talk about where I got from 4 years ago to now, maybe later on in the discussion.
Thanks so much, William. And Caroline, in your journey, you've been interested in D&I in different ways. I'd like you to share maybe one of your personal anecdotes of something that helped you maybe spark a catalyst for work and activity in the D&I space.
Sure, Liz, I definitely will. Can I just start by saying it's terrifying sitting up here, by the way, and up Kerry, for those of you who follow the
Says a Cork woman.
Says a Cork woman marrying Kerry man, there's a bit of contention there. But so I have had a personal experience. So my background is, I come from a human resource management background, and I had a team member come to me some time ago and talk to me about how difficult it was to change their what they refer to as dead name to their name as they identify it as now. And that person sat in front of me presenting as male, who transitioned to male, and the dead name was female orientated. And that person had to justify on calls remotely, why they were the person that is not their name on screen. And for somebody to even have to justify something like that, or even feel the need to do that, that's very disheartening. And it's disengaging for that person. And, we talk about, company culture and the need to bring everyone in. But if you're facing something, a practical example like that, where somebody's coming to work every day and their pay slip is the wrong name, their email is the wrong name, they're facing and having to justify why their name is different to the way they're presenting. That's very upsetting for that person. But it's also difficult for the people around them that, have to correct themselves and apologize afterwards. So seeing the emotion that person went through, and that's what I suppose sparked in me the reality that as a HR professional, I actually didn't really get the practical changes that could be made in the workplace to further help members of a community. So it was about taking action, not just writing pretty names. Someone mentioned in a previous talk about sticking a rainbow flag in it, but it was about actually making the changes in a practical way that made the difference for those people on a day-to-day basis. And if you're, someone else mentioned privilege, if you're a part of a majority group and you don't face that adversity day to day, unless you ask the questions to those that do and engage them in the solution, you're never going to make real change, which is essentially what we need,
Fantastic. Hopefully we can talk a bit about that process that you brought in at TELUS for transgender support process. It'd be interesting. I'm sure people in the room could maybe learn from that. William, I'd love you to share your personal story as you were one of the grassroots co-founders of the ERG at Pepsi.
Yeah, so we got going in 2018, and it really was born from this desire that we were seeing that we have a massive history of the ERG in question here, Equal as it's known. It's been going for 20 years in PepsiCo, but it didn't have a chapter in Ireland. And I was just like, okay, that's a bit odd considering that this was fresh off of the back of the fantastic referendum win, where more than half of the Irish population had declared that they were an ally. But when I was looking around in work, it's like, how do I know? Like, as in, there's nothing that was there really to see it. So we decided to bring Equal to Ireland and start a chapter here. We got going with just a committee of 3 of us to begin with, so it was very, very small. Thankfully, we had the support of the larger global ERG to kind of get some cookie cutter molds of things that we could do to launch correctly. We actually decided to launch with Ally Day. We didn't want to focus straight away on the LGBT people in the organization. We actually went straight for the allies. And it was really important that we did that because if we launched for just the queer people, then it might be that the allies could have felt that they weren't invited, that they didn't have a seat at the table that was there. And they were going to be representing the majority of the table. So it was really important that they were, from the very, very beginning, invited to that. We launched at Ally Day in 2019, where we decided to focus on a very simple table stake, which was, we are not inviting people to become allies. We are inviting people to show that they are already allies, to just make it a bit more visible. We did that in a couple of different ways. We had ally pledges, these massive boards that were outside of every one of our offices that we invited people to sign on their way in, to ask them to sign up to our events, to speak out when they hear homophobic language being used, and to join in and to participate with anything that we do throw. One of the biggest successes, though, was I'm wearing 2 lanyards at the moment here. I'm wearing my original Equal lanyard from PepsiCo, which is now falling to rags. I really need to try to replace it. It's 4 years old at this stage. We asked people to wear these lanyards for just a week. Just put them on instead of their regular lanyards for just 1 week for Ally Week when we launched. Following week, still lots of rainbow lanyards to be seen. The next month, they were still wearing them. It's been 4 years. If you go into any of the PepsiCo offices, you will still see these lanyards being worn with pride. And it might seem like a really small thing for a lot of people, but for a queer person, when we're able to look and see a sea of rainbows, when you walk into a canteen and you don't know anybody, you're brand new, When you see something like that, you're automatically going to let your guard down a little bit more. And actually, that was our intention for why we launched it in that way. The following year in 2020, right before the pandemic closed everything down, we relaunched with a new cycle of Equal. And a lot of people joined the committee that were brand new to the company because they saw like this very visual allyship. So I think it's a really, really important thing to have.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I think that's a really nice example of kickstarting the allyship community through that kind of visible process. Shane, you were mentioning when we were chatting before the event about different tactics that you've seen work well at VMware. And again, from your experience of coming into this as co-lead of the Pride pillar, very much an ally of the LGBTQ+ community, could you share some tactics that you've seen work really well at VMware?
Yeah, I can. I can't claim that I put any of these, structures or, practices in place. It was done by people long before me, and I'm really proud to continue them now. But like I said, if I met William 4 years ago, as an example, would have loved talk. We had a great conversation this morning. It would have been the exact same conversation. But would I have stuck up for William when the time came? I don't know, right? That's a 50-50 from my perspective, because I just didn't have the knowledge, the information, the appreciation of the challenges that can go with it. And so my user experience of the VMware Pride pod, right? If I just look at it like that for a second and get a bit techie, but firstly, they have a very active, Power of Difference group pod, right? Lots of events, speakers, things happening all over the world. I'm a real kind of podcast type person, so I like to play something, while I do some work, play, something happened in the US, a great speaker came in. I like to hear all of that stuff. For me though, that still wasn't enough, right? For me to kind of make that kind of jump to being a true ally. I'm a very nice person, but being a nice person is not being an ally, right? I thought being a nice person was an ally. Everyone here knows that's not necessarily the case. When the two go hand in hand, that's obviously perfection. Second thing VMware does really well is mentorship programs, or reverse mentorship programs, as it's called in this way. It doesn't matter, it's mentorship. So I had a mentor who was part of the Pride pod, and she and I struck up just a great partnership, great relationship. She's talked so much mainly about her best friend who was gay when they were growing up. I presume he still is, obviously. And just, I don't know, her passion and, just how deep she felt about him and, sticking up for him, essentially, right, in the words that I have now, simple words for that, again, inspired me. Still, it wasn't enough, right? I was like, I have to join the pod. Still, I had all those doubts. I don't have the right perspective. I don't know what to say. I'll say the wrong thing. What do all the letters stand for? All that sort of stuff that just I didn't have the confidence to join a meeting of 4 or 5 people. The kind of what pushed me over the edge was kind of we get LGBTQ training in the workplace by a company called Link. It's formal training, but they deliver it in a very informal manner, which suits me perfectly. And I think the facilitator, she was absolutely brilliant. She really brought it down into very plain, simple language for me. And she just said one thing, which is, look, we're in the community. We say the wrong things. We mess up. We don't know what stuff stands for. We have to research new things. And that just made it so simple for me. And then I was like, boom, I'm in. So have your pod, mentorship is just brilliant. Super way to do it, because sometimes as a senior person, there's a more junior person in the company. Let's talk about if it's about work. The conversation doesn't flow because maybe the more junior person is nervous. But when the junior person is the expert, it's just a super way to do it. And then thirdly, training. Training is a great way to show people how to be allies. And I am a middle-aged, white, balding, heterosexual man who needs very simple words to get me there. And I think that's, just that simplicity of communication really helped me in that training.
It's fantastic. I think you're a wonderful role model, Shane, to be stepping up and very much actively getting involved. And I think that's something, to take away from this day and from this panel is the value of allyship and the value of getting those people on board and training them and teaching them and bringing them into the space. Caroline, as HR manager, I'm sure you've done all sorts of different initiatives. What are the kind of ones that you'd really pick out that you've done as TELUS Ireland or a part of TELUS International?
Sure. So at TELUS International Ireland, we're based in Cork and Dublin, and diversity has always been one of our key pillars in terms of our strategic agenda. And basically, that just means the guys at the top, guys and gals, sorry, they're all focused on making sure that it's an inclusive workplace for everybody. So when it comes to things like policies and procedures or norms and practices, everything we do has to look at, is this going to support the wider audience, which is the team members, to make them feel included, and to, I suppose, foster a culture where ideas, wherever they come from, are accepted and welcomed, or is it going to have the opposite effect? And for us, we heard very clearly from our team members, who always say diversity and inclusion is wonderful at TELUS International, that there was a gap in terms of how we support our transgender team members. And relationships, for me, is where you're going to get every piece of information that you need from team members. When you come in the door to an organisation, you're not worried about the guys or girls at the top or whatever. Your focus is your manager, your peers, your job. That's your community. And if the relationships aren't trusting and fostered from day one, then you're not going to feel safe and comfortable in being your authentic self. And for us, being able to meet with those transgender team members and ask them, what do you need? You know, what changes do you need to see in this company that will allow you to, come in the door to work and feel included, to feel supported, and to feel as equal as everybody else, irrespective of what community you're in. And having those conversations gave us a very long list of practical ways that we could change things, from looking at the way we use technology, looking at the way we conduct one-to-ones, the way performance is managed, looking at the training education, like you've said, making sure that, gender-neutral facilities are accessible to team members, and not just for the LGBT, I always get mixed up there, Q+ community, but also for, women in the workplace and people who have disabilities. And it's a much broader picture than just one particular community. So the transgender support process was implemented to make sure people can change their names when they require to, that they have access to wellbeing supports and services, counselling supports if they need that there's a wellbeing officer on site that can support them. We have mental health first aiders, that we have Wellfests on a quarterly basis that embrace all communities irrespective of differences, and that everyone feels like they have a seat at the table and their voice, is important to be heard. And the one thing that I would say, just in a final point on that, is you have to reward and recognise the efforts of people who are championing diversity in the workplace, because praise promotes repeat performance, and I'm a strong believer in that. And we've just launched the Luminary Awards on a global scale, which is acknowledging and rewarding and recognising, those allies that stand up and advocate for the communities they support, those mentors and I suppose champions of diversity, but also leaders who go out of their way to talk about things that are challenging members of that community, and who are the drivers behind policies and procedures. And HR's role in all of this is not to be the loudest voice in the room, but more so to go behind the community and lift them up so they can be heard at the same level.
Fantastic. And to finish, I might finish with William. In terms of key practices, what are the big takeaways that you'd share with the audience here from PepsiCo?
I won't take too much time here because I think we're running slightly over after our slightly late entrance. But some of the big things, I suppose, is, again, it sounds like we're doing a lot similar with other companies, which is really refreshing to hear. We do a three-pronged approach for our D&I agenda, not just LGBT people, but also women inclusion, and also people of differing abilities. We have to look at it in the three-pronged approach and approach allyship across the board for them, because the entrance to allyship can be reached in any three of those. Most people, I think, will resonate an awful lot with seeing the opportunities to find allyship for women, for example, but the exact same concepts follow through for LGBT people. It just depends on, I suppose, which you feel more kind of resonating with. In terms of, I suppose, the best practices, what we're moving towards, we've activated our allies now. We've made them visible. Now we're moving into a process to turn them into advocates. We want people to be able to stand up and to really, I suppose, champion the LGBT plus community. We're engaging with some studies at the moment where we're taking our unconscious bias mandatory training that is already been rolled out, and we're considering a master's, as it were, for LGBT people. So it's looking at the opportunities where people can basically study and deliver some DE&I initiatives over about a 5-month period. So it's not going to be something that you can just sit down and click your way through a 20-minute training. This is something that you have to do and deliver some things towards. We'd like to apply this then to a third-party equality index recognition as well, so that we can see exactly where we are now and where we can make those improvements.
Fantastic. So I'm hoping to finish with a 10-second key takeaway from each of you. And some of the tactics we've talked about. Hopefully people can feel free to reach out if you want to learn more about things that have worked well and you want to learn more about. But William, starting with you, very quick, what's your big message?
Shane.
Sorry, Shane.
So for me, 10 seconds, simplicity in communication. I think there's a lot of, as I describe it, nice people out there like me that don't realize they need to do a little bit more to be allies. And then in terms of in the workplace, how you train them, speaking in very plain, simple language is hugely helpful in training them. Because in the corporate world, we can start creating slides and words get bigger and we create acronyms and stuff like that. But keeping it simple, I think, is hugely, hugely beneficial.
Fantastic.
For me, it's don't be the old school HR professional. We're all about people. It's about wrapping our arms around the community and actually supporting them to be the loudest voice in the room so that they can drive real change.
Fantastic. And William, to finish.
For mine, it's balance. You need to look at it from an internal and external, what your engagements are. It needs to be senior and junior level engagement. Give your junior members just as much of a seat at the table that they're able to shine for DE&I. They have the time and the space within their work that they're able to contribute into this area.
Fantastic. Wonderful. Now I'd like to give a round of applause to the